September 17th, 1862. The sun rose over Antietam Creek that Wednesday morning like any other. But by sunset, the fields near Sharpsburg, Maryland, would be drenched in more American blood than any single day in our nation's history. 23,000 men, killed, wounded, or missing. The Battle of Antietam, or Sharpsburg, as the Confederates called it, would mark the bloodiest 24 hours the United States had ever known. Brothers against brothers, friends against friends, a republic tearing itself apart along a quiet Maryland waterway. But before the cannons roared, before the musket balls flew like hail across the cornfield, before the sunken road earned its name as Bloody Lane, these men were sons, they were husbands, they were sweethearts writing letters home by candlelight. They carried photographs in their breast pockets. They dreamed of farms and futures. They worried about loved ones who worried about them. And they wrote letters. Letters that would arrive weeks later to families who could only wait and pray and hope that the next knock on the door wouldn't be the chaplain with his hat in his hands. Tonight, we share those letters, written in the days before and after Antietam, penned in hospital tents with shaking hands, scrawled on makeshift tables while cannon smoke still hung in the air, composed in the quiet moments before men marched toward their fate. These are their words, their voices, their final thoughts before one of the darkest days in American history. This is his final letter before Antietam, September 1862. Samuel C. Hodgman was there when the fighting reached its peak. Wounded twice, once in the leg, once by shell fragments, he found himself in a field hospital the day after the battle, September 18th. With pain coursing through his body, he took up his pen to write his brother. This is what he wrote. Hospital near the battlefield of September 17th, 1862. Dear brother, I have at last been in a fight, and a tough one too. I bear the marks of it, in the shape of a ball hole through my left leg about 4 or 5 inches above my knee, and a good hard rap from a piece of shell on the inside of the calf of my right. Neither of the wounds are serious, but they interfere materially with locomotion for the present. We had 29 men when we went into action, and have heard from 20 of them who are wounded. I have heard of but 2 who have come out safe. George Travis had his leg broken. I helped him behind a stump and have not since heard from him. It is now nearly noon of the 18th. Albert got a ball through his breast crosswise, not very bad. Lieutenant Fettplace was shot through the thigh. I got hit by the shell in the first of the firing, which seemed to be mainly directed at our company, and the one on the right of it, probably with the design of capturing the colors which were between us. I endeavored to rally our men around them twice, and was then wounded, and had to skedaddle to the rear. I walked about 2 miles, and there found a hospital, and had my wound dressed. It pains me considerably today, so much so that I shall not try to write much more. The details of the battle you will get in the papers much better than I could give them. I know scarcely anything of them as yet farther than what concerns our own wrecked and don't even know where that is now. I know that the Rebs flanked us and poured in a tremendous fire of shell, grape, and canister and musket balls, and learn that our troops have the best of it. Your affectionate Bro Samuel. C. Hodgman. Of the 29 men who went into action with Samuel Hodgman that day, only 2 walked away unscathed. 6 days after the guns fell silent, a young Harvard-educated officer named John Williams Hudson sat down to write to the woman he loved. At 26 years old, Lieutenant Hudson had survived both the battle and its immediate aftermath. But the exhaustion of constant movement, the pressure from worried families back home, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on his mind. John Hudson was the son of Congressman Charles Hudson, a Universalist minister and personal friend of President Lincoln. Before the war, John had studied law. Now he commanded men in Company D of the 35th Massachusetts Infantry. He would survive Antietam, Fredericksburg, Cold Harbor, and Petersburg, rising to lieutenant colonel before mustering out in 1865. But on this September day in 1862, camped at the mouth of Antietam Creek near Sharpsburg, he wrote to Sophia Whitney Mellon, the woman who would become his wife 3 years later. This is what he wrote. Mouth of the Antietam Creek, Maryland, September 23, 1862. My dear Sophie, it is about 3 or 4 days since I wrote. Since then, I have received various letters from you and other friends. Yours were dated September 7th, 9th, and 14th. I notice you and others seem dissatisfied that I do not write oftener. You all say, write twice a week, even if you only say a word. The request is flattering, but very cool. I can't do it while we are running about as we have been doing lately. Now don't think me unkind in saying this. I will write as often as I can and write a decent letter. Moreover, if any impertinent individual, regardless of the fact that I am now at work in the army and not a gent of leisure, expresses any surprise that I neglect you, please consider yourself authorized by me to say that I have not lost my interest in you, and that no conclusion can be drawn from what is done in a busy regiment. If other Maryland boys write oftener, and from them you leave of me oftener than I think I can write, since I must write to 2 or 3 families, you ought to be happy to know more than you otherwise would, instead of being dissatisfied. Your pictures are delightful. Why couldn't I have had as happy a sitting? Nobody likes mine, and I wonder not. We are now encamped at the same place as when I last wrote, if you call it a camp where men bivouac without tents. Irish? I am with Company D at my own request. I think I told you that General Ferrero had agreed to send me back. I have been a little down, but am now well. I shall go with the regiment, and have no doubt about my ability to do it. You will perhaps be pleased to know that I have not yet had any symptoms of fever and ague. I've got a Washington darky for a servant. I expect to get to be a long-heeled Republican in reality soon, for I nightly sleep alongside this nig. You may certainly keep the picture of B and me if you want to. I asked you to send it to Mary, intending to write to her to have it varnished anew. Mary's letter just received tells me that she is going to visit you. She may perhaps tell you some things more I have written. I am obliged to stop now on account of business and the hubbub which prevails around me. I sit in a violent smoke. When we move, it may be toward the enemy or from them. None of us can tell which. Don't be surprised if you don't hear from me so soon as you would like to. If we ever get into a comfortable camp, I will write many letters and a good proportion of them to you. With love to you all, and to Mrs. Martha and the rest of the Whites, I am ever yours, John W. September 24th. After writing, I got a letter from Mary, and now have no doubt that you have read my letter from Brookville, and that you see I should like to write a great deal. In future, know that I will write as often as I can well do so, and be content. Won't you, dear? If I'm sick, I will say so. Your interesting questions about my being threatened with fever came after I had endured 10 days of banging and passed through 2 battles, and it is funny to read them. Mother fears disease for me more than bullets, and so on. When you see her, please say I rather apprehend danger from the bullets. With love to you all. J. W. Hudson. Lieutenant Hudson's frustration with the demands of letter writing reveals a deeper truth about the soldier's life. caught between duty to country and duty to those who loved them back home. Charles, known as Charley, was a young soldier in Company C of the 15th Massachusetts Infantry. 4 days after the battle, on Sunday, September 21st, he sat down to write his parents. But the letter would take him 2 days to complete, for between the writing, he walked the battlefield itself. What he saw there, what he described, offers one of the most haunting eyewitness accounts of Antietam's aftermath. This is what he wrote. Camp Forbes, near Keedysville, Maryland. Sunday, September 21st, 1862. Dear parents, it is now about a week since I last wrote, and I am now about 50 miles by a direct route from Brookville. I mentioned in my last about starting immediately, but for some reason, we did not start until Wednesday morning, 17th September, and after marching all day with knapsacks on, we halted about 2 miles beyond Damascus. We were all tired, and so every company hired a team to carry our baggage for the rest of the trip. Up early the next morning, 18 September, and off, passing through several towns, among which were Monrovia, New Market, and Frederick City, and at last halted for the night outside of Frederick. All the above towns are very pretty places in anything but war times, but now they are used as prisons for rebels and hospitals for our wounded. Monday, September 22nd, 1862. Well, I am now about 8 miles from where I commenced writing. I will begin where I left off. We started early the next morning, 19th September, and were soon crossing the mountains, which I think are the Blue Ridge. The scenery is truly splendid, but we had but little time to stop and admire it. We stopped for the night about a mile beyond Middletown in a beautiful valley. The next day, 20 September, we went through Boonesboro and stopped at noon in Keedysville near the Antietam battleground. After resting a while, I started off to see what might be seen. The first place I came to was a barn. All the barns and houses around here are used as hospitals. And there I saw Gilman, W. Lath, wounded through the calf of his leg. Not seriously. Henry Gilbert Howe wounded likewise. Otis Osgood in the arm between elbow and wrist. He is afraid he will lose his arm. Passing to another barn, I saw it was full of men with arms and legs off. I will not attempt to describe the scene. Some were having legs taken off. The surgeon administers chloroform and then goes to work like a butcher. He is only 4 minutes to amputating a leg, and you can judge how carefully he works. After leaving the hospitals, I went to the battlefield. Oh God, pen cannot describe the sight. I can only say that there was about 6 of the nasty, gray-clad cusses dead to our 1. They were mowed down in heaps and in windrows some 20 rods long, and it is a singular fact that the Rebs were all black and awfully bloated. It is said that the cause of this is drinking gunpowder and whiskey before fighting. I think this is very probable, for our brave fellows are not found in such a condition. The fight occurred last Wednesday, and the line of battle was 15 miles long. It truly was the most terrific battle on record. 2 regiments have been hard at work ever since the fight, and not half are yet buried. The Union boys who are recognized have a slab erected to mark the spot where they are buried, but the Rebs are planted unwept, unhonored, and unsung. I could only wish that there were 1,000 times as many more of them to be sunk in the earth. I cut some buttons off the dead skunks' coats and have a lot of little relics, but I have no means of sending them home. I could relate sights that I saw on that field that make your blood run cold, but time will not permit. If ever I see you again, I will give you a full account. After spending an hour or so on the field, I crossed over to the grounds occupied by the gallant 15th Massachusetts. There I saw Henry A. Putnam, Archibald Wright, George T. D. Putnam, Elisha G. Buss, and others, and from them I learned that Charley E. Holbrook was shot dead on the field. George Frank Osgood is in one of the hospitals wounded in the arm, but not severely. I could not find the place he was in. I was sorry, for H. May wished to see him. Isaac P. Koenig, who is reported killed around here, is in one of the barns with a bullet in his leg. But I must close. I commenced this letter in Keedysville, but I am finishing it in Sharpsburg, about 5 miles beyond. We are in General Wilcox's brigade and expect to start to cross over into Virginia very soon. I received your letter. I still work for the captain, who is a good friend to me. Keep up good cheer. The death blow to the rebellion is struck, and I shall be safe at home in a few months. I am tough and hardy. Write soon. Your absent son, Charley, visited the widow Hoffman's barn that Saturday afternoon, 3 days after the battle, where wounded men from Company C lay in agony while surgeons worked with brutal efficiency, amputating limbs in just 4 minutes. Charles R. Brown served with the 6th Maine Battery in Banks's division. He wrote to a young woman named Mary Gates from Boonesville, Maryland, on September 18th, just 1 day after the battle. His letter captures the chaos of the march, the horror of seeing wounded men for the first time, and the uncertainty that hung over every soldier as they waited to see if the fighting would resume. This is what he wrote. Boonesville, Maryland, September the 18th, 1862. Kind friend, it has not been long since I wrote you, but it has seen many changes. We, after leaving the Heights, joined our battery and have had a long and wearisome march Saturday last. Today is Thursday. We was ordered to halt and inspect and have everything ready for action. We then could hear the roar of cannon, and Sunday we neared them so as we could hear the roar of musketry and a legible word. At night that morning, for we marched from early morning until 3 o'clock the next morning without stopping to feed our horses. It was a fearsome one and encamped within half a mile of the battlegrounds of South Mountain, where brave men fought and fell by the hundreds. It a desperate struggle the next morning. Just a few steps from where we camped, they began to dig a trench to bury those that had died of their wounds in the night. For there was a barn where they brought in 40 or 50, and after they had brought out the dead, I went out and looked at them, and for me, unaccustomed to such sights, it was horrid to see brave men shot and mangled. It would make the sternest countenance turn pale. Then I thought of the friends they had left to mourn their death. But none were there to bid them a last goodbye. But in the roar and turmoil of battle they bid adieu to earth then. I went up to see the wounded, and it would move the stoutest heart to pity to see them poor, fallen, suffering, and some in the agonies of death. It is horrid. It was then we moved shortly in pursuit of the rebels, and Tuesday night we encamped in sight of a field that was there next day, which was yesterday, drenched in human blood. On the next morning, we, being on McClellan's reserve staff, was fastened on a height as such, and commanding a view of the field. The roar of musketry and booming of cannon was kept up all day. It was as bloody a fight as was ever painted on the pages of history. All day long they fought, and many a brave youth fell with a fatal shot. No one can describe it. We was not called into action today. It is quiet. It is reported that we have surrounded them and given them until this afternoon to bury their dead and surrender. How true I do not know. We are all well. I received your kind letter Tuesday. I was glad to hear from you and hope you will write again soon. You inquired about Orest. He makes as brave a soldier as he died. saying of temperance, when he cannot ride, he will go afoot. You speak of sickness out in the will, but you are pulling on the wrong string, for all that I had to do there is done away with. I have no claim or interest there. Perhaps you won't believe me, but it is just as true as it was when I asked you to. But you believed it at last. And so you will this. I understand that Byron Folks is enlisting. If so, tell him to write me a letter and wait for and answer before he does. Tell him for me that he will find a changing in thing all around in living and hardships, which he would have to undergo marching day and night without food and sleep, and the soul-sickening sight beside the dangers of the battlefield. All is hard and dangerous, and it requires an iron constitution to stand it. But I as yet have not seen anything more than I expected when I left, so I am not disappointed. Tell him, situated as he is to stay at home, I did not start for pleasure but to do a duty to my country, and that duty I shall have a chance to do much sooner than most of the rest after they enlisted. We expect to have a hard fight yet before they are drove out of Maryland. We now are having a smart shower now, and I have to flee under one of the caissons. That is a carriage which is used to carry ammunition in, and here I try to write on my lap. Not much such privileges as I was to have at home, but it is as good as I expect, whilst I am out here, and when you are enjoying all of the blessing of a good home and the attentions of some nice young spark, remember that it is for home and friends that we are deprived of them and daring the dangers which seem to you in our quiet. But I must draw to a close, for I come to the bottom. Did I have time, I would write more, but I think here is as much as you care to read. Goodbye until I hear from you again, from your true friend, Chaz R. Brown. 6 Main Battery, Banks Div, Washington, D.C. Mary H. Gates, Charles Brown, wrote these words while taking shelter beneath a caisson, an ammunition cart, as rain fell over the Maryland countryside. James Chadwick served with Company Y of the 10th Pennsylvania Reserve Corps, also known as the 39th Pennsylvania Volunteers. His regiment had fought at South Mountain just days before Antietam, losing men from what they called the College Company. By October 7th, 3 weeks after the battle, James sat down to write his father from the Army's headquarters near Sharpsburg. His letter offers a window into the confusion soldiers felt about their own movements, the grim reality of inadequate burials, and the eternal optimism that the war would soon be over. This is what he wrote. Headquarters, 3rd Brigade, PRC near Sharpsburg, Saltinand, October 7th, 1862. Dear Father, your letter bearing date October 1st has just come to hand. I hasten to reply. I mailed a letter to you about a week ago which I wrote near Washington when trying to get back to the division. I succeeded in getting on the cars at Washington and came by rail to Sandy Hook, near Harper's Ferry, from which place I walked to our present location, arriving in camp about 9 a.m. on Sabbath. I found the boys generally well, but many I missed, they being among the honored dead. My company suffered very severely in the engagement at South Mountain for the number of men engaged. She had but 1 killed on the field, although those who were wounded were all dangerously so, one of whom died of his injuries day before yesterday. You say you have lost all track of my company, captain, brigade, etc. since our return from Richmond. Everything is just as it was and has been for a year. My division is the Pennsylvania Reserve Corps, 3rd Brigade, 10th Regiment, Company Thuxane, Captain Eyre. I explained once to you how the 10th Regiment, PRC, and the 39th Pennsylvania Volunteers mean one and the same organization. Our regiment is the 39th in number raised in Pennsylvania and the 10th in number of that particular organization, known as the Pennsylvania Reserve Volunteer Corps, which consisted of 15 regiments and was raised according to an act of the Pahunter legislature, dated May 1st, 1861. The number 39 is scarcely ever used when referring to our regiment, the 10th PRC being used. As to your not knowing where to find our division in the papers, I think you are only speaking comparatively, for there should not be a child in America, North or South, who has not heard of the Pennsylvania Reserves. This division was under Hooker in the late battles in Maryland until he was wounded. Then the division was under Reynolds as a corps commander, he taking Hooker's place, and under Meade as the immediate division commander. Reynolds still has charge of the corps, which consists of the divisions of Ricketts, King, Doubleday, and ours. McCall is not with us and has not been since he was taken prisoner. He has been nominated for Congress. Meade is still in command of our division, and I suppose will be for some time. The colonel of the 10th, James T. Kirk, is in command of the 3rd Brigade temporarily, as General Jackson, formerly colonel of the 9th, is absent, at home and sick. I have been all over the battlefield of Antietam, which is but 1/2 mile from here. I could scarcely endure the stench of dead horses which cover the fields. It is no uncommon sight to see the dead sticking partly out of the ground, and in more instances than one I saw skulls lying on top of the ground. There was not even the sign of flesh on them, so entirely had decomposition taken place. Such sights have become common. I saw Dr. Klotz yesterday. He is captain of a company in one of the new regiments. Jeremiah Burtzel is in a regiment near at hand, but I have not seen him yet. I saw Sam Bickle at that convalescent camp. He had been sick, but was recovering. When I got back to the division, I found several letters, among which were a number from home. I have not seen the citizen for perhaps 4 months. I would be glad if you would send it to me occasionally. I expect we will move again before long. McClellan has received quite a large reinforcement of new troops. I prophesy that we will be in possession of Richmond before 6 weeks. There was some talk of the Penna Reserves being sent home to their state to be recruited again. But I guess when we are sent, it will be toward the Rebs and in the front as usual. I think of nothing more at present. My love to all. Kiss Mary for me. Yours affectionately, James. 3 weeks after the battle, skulls still lay exposed on the surface of the Antietam battlefield, and the stench of dead horses made it nearly unbearable to walk the ground where 23,000 men had fallen. Not all the letters from Antietam were written by Union soldiers. Clayton G. Coleman fought for the Confederacy, and on September 27th, 10 days after the battle, he wrote to a woman named Lucy from Winchester, Virginia. His letter reveals the Confederate perspective on the fighting, the massive number of casualties on both sides, and the strain that constant marching and combat had placed on Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. This is what he wrote. Winchester, September 27th, 62. My dear Lucy, your very kind and interesting letter to Anna, bearing date the 9th instant, has just come to hand today through the hand of Mr. Howard, who came up from Orange, and although Louise had received one of a later date from Fanny, yet I do assure you it was read with the greatest interest. I have been here now since the 16th, at which time I came from Maryland. Or rather I was in Maryland. 10 days, during which time I was in Frederick City and Hagerstown. In the former county we were vexed with a good deal of kind feeling, but with not so much in the latter, Washington Cumbers, as that county had already furnished 14 companies to the Federal Army, 11 of which surrendered at Harper's Ferry. I suppose you have heard of the surrender of 13,000 to General Jackson, with any quantity of arms, stores, etc. But the hottest battle of the war was fought near Sharpsburg, Maryland, on the 17th instant. The battle lasted all day, and the loss was terrific on both sides, the enemy fighting with more desperation than ever before. We call it a victory, and the Yankees did so at first, too. We held the ground, and both sides were too much wasted to renew the fight. Next day, we fell back across the Potomac, and the enemy then commenced shelling us and boasted that they had driven us across. They acknowledged the loss of 16 generals. We had 2 generals killed and 10 wounded. Winchester has been perfectly crowded with the wounded, there having been more than 3,000 here at one time and continually passing through. The NY Tribune says if we had followed them, their army would have been annihilated, and General Lee says he could have done so with 5,000 more fresh troops. But men had been marched so much and were so broken down that we had 60,000 stragglers. Our army is now between Martinsburg and Williamsport and along the river. Our brigade lost 8 out of 10 in the last fight, and my company lost 22 out of 23 men. I don't suppose you have heard of any of the killed in the different fights. Well, they are so many that I could not begin. Coles, Botts, Neff, and Baylor of the 1st Brigade were killed in the battles at Manassas. Every one of your acquaintances in the 4th Alabama and the 11th Mississippi were killed or wounded, and indeed, I reckon it is almost the case in every regiment. Joe Sherrard is a 1st lieutenant in a cavalry company. I am going into the medical department and expect to go to Richmond next week for that purpose. We are staying at your Aunt Anne's, and the house is crowded with wounded. Sunday 28th. Anna having stopped me from writing last night, I will finish my epistle this morning. We have just returned from church, where we heard service from Mr. Meredith and a most elaborate sermon from a Mr. Scott. Our army is at Bunker Hill, and it is thought we will have another fight there or at this place. Although I have been sick, yet I have had my hands full attending to the wounded. On the first day I dressed 43 wounds, and since that time I have had 27 under my charge. Even the sidewalks of the streets are full of wounded, and there is a great scarcity of surgeons, and no place for their accommodation. There are now 6,000 wounded here. Anna and I leave here for Louisa on Tuesday, where I shall go to Richmond to stand examination before the board. Your Uncle Joe speaks of taking a house at Cap'n Springs and sending his family up there. Louise says if the enemy occupy W again, she will stay a short time to get some articles of clothing, which cannot be procured now, and then come out into our lines. Clayton Coleman's company entered the Battle of Antietam with 23 men. Only one walked away unscathed. George Washington Whitman, brother of the poet Walt Whitman, commanded his company at Antietam when his captain fell ill. In the days following the battle, he wrote to his mother describing the 51st New York's assault on what became known as Burnside's Bridge. His account captures the intensity of the fighting, the chaos of the charge, and the moment when Union forces finally broke through Confederate defenses. This is what he wrote. Early on the morning of the 17th, the 1st and 2nd Brigades of our division was ordered down to take the bridge. The 1st Brigade was ordered to take a position at our end of the bridge and try and drive the enemy from behind his shelter, while our brigade, which is the 2nd, was to be held in reserve. The 1st did not seem inclined to advance to the position assigned them, but rather held back. So Burnside, who was looking on, ordered Sturgis to send our brigade there, saying, so the story goes, that he knew we would take it. As soon as we were ordered to forward, we started on a double quick and gained the position, although we lost quite a number of men in doing it. We were then ordered to halt and commence firing, and the way we showered the lead across that creek was nobody's business. I had command of our company again, and as soon as the men got steadily settled down to their work, I took a rifle from one of the wounded men and went in, loading and firing as fast as anyone. After about half an hour, the enemy's fire began to slacken a little, and soon the order was given for our brigade to charge. The 51st Pennsylvania had the right of our brigade and should have crossed first, but our boys could not wait. And with the cry of "Remember Reno," we started for the bridge, the 51st Penn and our regt crossing together. As soon as the rebels saw us start on a charge, they broke and run, and the fight at the bridge was ended. After we crossed, we found the enemy had fell back about half or 3/4 of a mile to another range of hills, where they were protected by stone fences, and the 3rd Brigade of our division and a part of the division of General Cox were ordered to advance and engage them. They moved up and charged, driving the rebel infantry in fine style when the enemy brought up a battery of artillery, which poured the grape and canister into our boys, so that they were forced to fall back to our brigade, who was then acting as a reserve. Things began to look rather squally, and although our brigade was nearly out of ammunition, we were ordered to the front again. We formed line of battle and advanced over the hill until we met the enemy who was moving down towards us, when both parties took a position, and we went at it again for the second time in one day. Our regt fired every round of ammunition we had and took from all the dead and wounded on the field, and then we lay down as we would not leave the field until we were ordered. We lay there about half an hour without firing a shot, which seemed to puzzle the rebels very much, as they did not come any closer to us, but kept up a pretty brisk fire from where they were. After a while, another regiment was sent in to relieve us. George Washington Whitman and the 51st New York charged Burnside's bridge shouting, "Remember Reno," honoring their fallen corps commander from the Battle of South Mountain. Lieutenant Theodore Flood served with the 125th Pennsylvania Infantry, a 9-month regiment formed from companies recruited in Blair and Huntingdon counties. Antietam was their first combat engagement. They had been in service just over a month when they found themselves leading Mansfield's 12th Corps attack across the cornfield, pushing into the West Woods near the Dunkard Church. What happened in those 20 minutes would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. This is what Lieutenant Flood later recalled, and then marched to South Mountain, reaching there on Sunday evening, just as the Battle of South Mountain was finished. We marched to the battlefield of Antietam, where we went into that awful conflict early on the morning of Wednesday, the 17th day of September. While waiting in line of battle for orders to advance and fire, Adjutant Johnston, of our regiment, was mortally wounded and died in a few hours. The battle was on in full force. Confederate pickets were shooting down our officers. Shells were flying over our heads. Horses and men lay dead on the field. We were ordered forward in line of battle, and Captain Wallace stepped out in front of the company, waving his sword, and called out, "Boys, remember our battle cry, 'In God we trust.'" This was taken up as a battle cry by adjoining companies along the line, until we reached the edge of a woods, where we were halted and ordered to fire. The enemy met us with a heavy charge. We could see them coming in line of battle as we loaded and fired. General Mansfield fell mortally wounded just in the right front of our regiment while reconnoitering. The blood from his wound reddened his long white beard. As we stood firing into the ranks of the enemy, the second man to me, George A. Simpson, while bravely holding the flag aloft, was hit with a bullet from a Confederate gun, which pierced his brain, and he fell dead. A second man picked up the flag, and he was shot down. A third, and he fell. The fourth took it up, and he was shot and fell. Then Sergeant W. W. Greenland picked up tile flag, stained with the blood of Simpson, and Captain Wallace, taking it in charge, carried it across the field to the rear of the nearest battery. And there he, aided by Captains Bell and McKeege and Lieutenant Thomas McAmont, rallied about 200 of the regiment, who remained in support, while our batteries operated with deadly execution upon the enemy during the rest of tile conflict. The conflict was raging all along the line of Tile Army. The Confederates were pressing us hard. Our line was broken, and a new line of battle was formed in the rear. 229 men of our regiment were killed and wounded in about 20 minutes. Of these, 84 were slightly wounded, but not disabled, and therefore were not reported. It was a dreadful struggle, and we were thrust into the very furnace of battle. 4 men fell carrying the colors of the 125th Pennsylvania before Sergeant Greenland finally carried the blood-stained flag to safety. 229 casualties in 20 minutes, and now we come to the final letter. Wilder Dwight was a lieutenant colonel in the 2nd Massachusetts Infantry. On the morning of September 17th, as the mist hung low over Antietam Creek, he sat in his saddle and wrote a brief note to his mother. Elizabeth A. Dwight. The battle was just beginning. Hooker's men were already engaging the enemy, and Wilder Dwight had a premonition of what was to come. This letter, written in 2 parts, before and after he was wounded, has become one of the most haunting documents of the Civil War. These were his final words. Near Sharpsburg, September 17, 1862. On the field, dear mother, it is a misty, moisty morning. We are engaging the enemy and are drawn up in support of Hooker, who is now banging away most briskly. I write in the saddle to send you my love, and to say that I am very well so far. Dearest mother, I am wounded so as to be helpless. Goodbye if so it must be. I think I die in victory. God defend our country. I trust in God and love you all to the last. Dearest love to Father and all my dear brothers. Our troops have left the part of the field where I lay. Mother, yours Wilder. All is well with those that have faith. Lieutenant Colonel Wilder Dwight died on the battlefield at Antietam alone, after Union troops advanced past his position. He was 31 years old. These letters, written in the hours before battle, in the days after the smoke cleared, in hospital tents and by candlelight, they remind us that history is not made of dates and strategies and troop movements alone. History is made by men. Men who loved, men who feared, men who hoped they would see their families again, and men who knew they would not. September 17, 1862, the Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest single day in American history. But before it was history, it was life, real blood, real grief. Samuel Hodgman survived his wounds. John Williams Hudson married his Sophie and lived until 1872. James Chadwick went home to kiss his Mary. George Washington Whitman survived the war. His brother Walt would later write of the toll it took on those who lived through it. But Wilder Dwight, Charley Holbrook, George Simpson, and 23,000 others, they gave everything on the fields near Sharpsburg, Maryland. We share these letters tonight not to glorify war, but to remember the cost, to honor the sacrifice, to hear their voices across the centuries, and to never forget what they endured for the country they believed in. These letters are their final testimony, their witness to history. And now, they are yours to remember. Before we close tonight, I want to ask you something. We've covered Antietam, the bloodiest day. But there are more stories to tell. More letters waiting to be read. More voices that need to be heard. So I'm asking you, which battle should we cover next? Should we read the letters from Gettysburg, 3 days in July that decided the fate of the nation? Should we hear from the men who fought at Shiloh, where spring blossoms fell on fields of blood? Or should we venture to Fredericksburg, Cold Harbor, Chickamauga? Leave a comment below and let me know. Which battlefield do you want to hear from next? Which soldiers' voices should we bring back from history? Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. And as Lieutenant Colonel Wilder Dwight wrote in his final moments, all is well with those that have faith.